I always thought I had it all. A house in the suburbs, a wife who was beautiful, funny, and smart, 2 kids who were growing up so fast, and a job that, while not perfect, paid the bills and allowed us a comfortable life. Laura and I, we had the kind of life people envied. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. I never once thought that the perfect life I built was a house of cards, waiting to collapse. That was until I started noticing the little things, the things that didn't add up. It started out slow, almost imperceptible. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. But when you've been married for almost a decade and shared a life with someone, you start to pick up on things. You notice when they act differently, even if it's subtle. For Laura, it started with the late nights. She'd tell me she was out working on her blog or meeting up with friends for drinks. I had no reason not to believe her. After all, she was a stay-at-home mom who ran a fashion blog. The blog was her passion and I supported it. She even started doing collaborations with brands and building her online following. I'd see her sitting at the kitchen table, editing photos, writing posts, getting excited about a new partnership. It made sense that sometimes she'd go out to network or grab drinks with the girls from her blog, right? But the thing is, the stories didn't always add up. One night, she told me she was at a friend's house, but when I checked her social media, I saw a post from a new restaurant that she didn't mention. Another time, she said she was attending a blogger event, but her location tagged her at a bar I knew wasn't anywhere near where the event was held. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just overthinking. But the more it happened, the more it began to feel like I was being lied to. Then there was the gym. Laura had been working with a personal trainer, David, for a while. I didn't think much of it. She was always talking about how much she enjoyed her workouts, and David seemed like a solid guy. He was a professional, well-built, friendly enough. He'd even come over a few times to train Laura in our living room, which I thought was a pretty nice arrangement. I'd be in the office working or out in the backyard with the kids, and they'd be in the living room doing their thing. It was convenient, I suppose. But after a while, something felt off about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but when Laura started staying late after these training sessions, I began to feel uneasy. It wasn't just the late nights anymore. It was the little touches, the glances, the way she seemed to want to keep everything about their sessions under wraps. One day, I found a text message on her phone from David. It was innocent enough, nothing that screamed affair just yet. It was something like, "You were amazing today, can't wait to push you harder next time." But the tone of it, I don't know, it bothered me. It felt overly familiar for a trainer, like there was something more going on. And Laura's response? She just wrote, "Thanks, David. I feel great," like it was no big deal. But something about the way it was written made my stomach turn. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was nothing. I didn't want to be that guy, paranoid, overthinking things, accusing his wife of stuff without proof. But the unease didn't go away. In fact, it only grew. At that point, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut anymore. I started snooping. I know it wasn't the healthiest way to handle it, but I needed answers. I wasn't going to sit here and be made a fool of. So, I did something I never thought I would. I installed tracking software on Laura's phone. I can already hear the judgment. You're probably thinking, "Sam, you should have just talked to her, asked her outright, and not gone behind her back like that." And maybe you're right. But when you've been married for years and built a life together, you start to feel a sense of ownership over the truth. You feel like you deserve it. I didn't want to go blind into a confrontation that could end with nothing but excuses and lies. I wanted proof. It wasn't long before I found what I was looking for. The first thing I saw was a string of flirtatious text messages between Laura and David. They were talking about meeting up after the gym, and there was more than just a casual vibe to it. There was something in the way they communicated, something that felt intimate, like they had a history. I saw David complimenting her on her body, telling her how good she was looking lately, even talking about the kind of things that made me feel like I was missing out. And the pictures, God, the pictures. I should have known. The first one was just a selfie, but there was something about the way Laura was leaning in to take it. Her hair tousled, the way her lips were parted, the look in her eyes that wasn't the look of a woman talking to her personal trainer. It was the look of a woman in the middle of an affair. Then there were the others. More photos came in after that, pictures of her in workout clothes, but posed in ways that were more than just casual. Flashes of skin, little hints of something that made my stomach churn. It was all there in the messages. "I miss you, can't wait to see you again, and last night was so good." I should have confronted her then, but I didn't. Part of me wanted to, but another part, maybe the part that wanted to pretend things were still okay, held me back. I couldn't. I wasn't ready. And maybe, deep down, I was hoping that I was wrong. Maybe this was all some weird misunderstanding, some weird coincidence. But no. There it was, staring me in the face. The worst part? I hadn't even caught them yet. All I had was these texts, these photos. I still wasn't sure what to do with it. Should I confront her? Should I just walk away? Should I let it go and pretend like I didn't see it? I wanted to believe in my wife, I really did. But the more I saw, the harder it became to ignore the truth. Something was broken between us and I had no idea how to fix it. I spent the next couple of days in a daze trying to act like everything was fine. I'd see her in the mornings, acting like she always did, talking about the kids, telling me how busy she was with her blog. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop seeing those pictures, those messages, and the image of her with David. One day it all came to a head. I came home early around 4 p.m. and noticed her car was in the driveway. But something felt off. There was noise coming from the bathroom, muffled voices. I didn't know what it was at first. I told myself it was nothing. But then I heard a familiar sound, a laugh. It was David's laugh. I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest. The realization hit me like a freight train. He was here. In my house. But I didn't confront them. I didn't storm in and demand an explanation. Instead, I quietly slipped out of the house and waited in my car, watching as David left, laughing like nothing was wrong. I had no proof, just my suspicion. But my gut told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was happening. I knew who David was and I knew what he was doing in my home. I wasn't ready to face it yet. Not in person. Not face to face. But I would. I had to. The next day I gathered more proof. I went through Laura's phone again, digging deeper, reading more messages. One text jumped out, "I want to make you mine, Laura. No more hiding." That was it. That was the final confirmation. I had all the proof I needed. And I wasn't about to let it go. What do you do when the person you trusted most in the world betrays you? What do you do when your whole life feels like a lie? I didn't know. But I was going to find out. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I spent the next few days numb, just floating through the motions. Every time Laura looked at me, it felt like she was looking right through me. And every time I saw her laugh, talk about her blog, or ask about the kids, I could hear David's voice in my head, telling her how great she looked, how good they were together. I couldn't even stomach the thought of it anymore. I wanted to confront her, call her out, throw everything in her face, but I knew that wouldn't get me what I wanted. No, I needed to get even. I needed her to feel what I was feeling. It took me a few days to come up with something. I could have gone the angry route. Yelled at her, caused a scene. I could have stormed into that gym, called David out in front of everyone, humiliated them both. But I wanted more than that. I wanted her to see exactly how much I knew, and how much I wasn't going to put up with. I wanted her to feel small. I wanted everyone to know what she'd done. So I started planning. I've never been a guy to take revenge lightly. Hell, before all this, I barely even knew how to hold a grudge. But now I could taste it. And it wasn't just about getting her back, it was about showing everyone what kind of person she really was. I wasn't going to just let this go. I wasn't going to let her get away with wrecking everything we'd built. First thing I did was create a fake Instagram profile. A fake influencer account. I spent hours building it, picking the right name, the right profile picture, and posting a few lifestyle shots, making it look like I had followers. It wasn't hard. All I needed was a few basic props, some well-placed hashtags, and a touch of creativity. I needed to make it believable. I made sure to follow a bunch of people she knew, including some of her friends and David. At first, they didn't notice. It was just some random influencer in the crowd. But that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to blend in. The last thing I needed was for anyone to get suspicious before I was ready. Then came the big part. The event. I knew Laura's friends well enough to know what they'd find exciting, what would get them talking. And the thing that would make them talk most was an exclusive influencer event. Something big and important. So, I called up a local club I'd been to a few times and made arrangements. The plan was simple. Rent out the club for a night, make it look like I was hosting a private influencer party, and invite Laura's entire friend group. I'd get David to come, too, pretending it was some kind of collaboration between him and me. I knew it would be risky. But it was the only way to really hit them where it would hurt. For a week leading up to the event, I worked on building up the hype. I posted sneak peeks of the event on my fake Instagram account, shared flashy photos of the venue, dropped hints about the exclusive guests who would be attending, and sent out the invites. I made sure Laura saw them. I wanted her to get curious. I wanted her to wonder what I was up to. She noticed. I could see it in her eyes when she saw the post. She tried to act cool about it like it didn't matter, but I knew better. She was interested. She started asking me questions like where I was going to be, who else was invited. I kept the details vague, just saying it was a networking event for influencers, with some special guests she might know. The night of the event, I made sure everything was set up perfectly. The club had a private VIP area that I'd rented, and I'd arranged for a projector to show a video on the wall, right in the center of everything. It was my secret weapon. When the guests started arriving, I was buzzing with adrenaline. I greeted them all as if nothing was wrong, acting like I was just some regular influencer hosting a fun night out. Laura was among the first to show up, dressed up like she was ready for her own photo shoot. Her smile was bright, but I could see the nervousness in her eyes. I could see her scanning the room, wondering what exactly was going on. But she didn't have a clue yet. David showed up soon after, looking cocky as ever. He didn't seem to notice anything off. He probably thought I was just some wannabe influencer who had a few followers and a nice venue to throw a party in. He was there for one reason: to get attention. Little did he know he was about to get more than he bargained for. The first few hours of the event went as planned. People drank, mingled, and talked shop. I'd made sure to casually drop comments that would make Laura nervous. I'd ask her friends about their own relationships, about cheating, about betrayal. I made sure that every conversation seemed to circle around the idea of infidelity, never directly mentioning her but always nudging things in that direction. People were into it. Laura was into it. And then I made my move. I took a deep breath and announced that I was working on a documentary. I said it was about family betrayals and how they affected people's lives. I threw in a casual "cheating is something we don't talk about enough, you know," and watched as the room quieted. People were intrigued. That's when I started asking the uncomfortable questions. I didn't directly accuse anyone, but I was subtle. I asked people how they felt about loyalty. I asked them if they thought their partners would cheat. I asked them to imagine what they'd do if they found out. And when I saw Laura squirming, I knew I was getting to her. Her eyes kept darting to David, then to me. She looked like she was about to explode with nervous energy, but she didn't know what to do. Finally, I hit them with the big reveal. I stood up on the stage and the room went silent. "All right, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've got something special for you tonight." A sneak peek of the documentary. I pointed at the projector screen. And that's when I played the video. It wasn't just a video. It was a recording. A recording of Laura and David talking, laughing, about the affair. They didn't know they were being filmed. It was from one of their gym sessions right in our living room. They were joking about how easy it was to lie to me, how they loved the secrecy of it all. It was disgusting. As the video played, I could hear gasps from the crowd. I could see Laura's face go pale, the blood draining from her cheeks. Her hand flew up to her mouth in horror. David, on the other hand, looked like he'd just been punched in the gut. He didn't move, didn't say anything. The room was dead silent for what felt like forever. Then the murmur started. People started talking, whispering. I saw Laura's face twist with humiliation, her eyes darting around the room, trying to find a way out of it, but there was no escape. For once, I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't care about how this would destroy our family, how it would wreck everything. All I could think about was how sweet it felt to watch her squirm. But the truth was, as the night wore on and I watched Laura struggle to hold herself together, I started feeling empty. I wasn't getting the satisfaction I thought I would. Revenge felt good in the moment, but now it just felt hollow. I had done it. I had exposed her. I had exposed them both. But what did it matter? It didn't fix anything. It didn't change what she had done to me, to our kids, to our family. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge wasn't going to make it better. I thought it would make me feel powerful, like I had some control over the situation. But all it did was make me feel lost. The aftermath came quickly, like a storm you see on the horizon but can't prepare for. It wasn't just the embarrassment I expected. It was the fallout that really hit me. Laura didn't even say a word to me when we left the club. We got into the car and she sat there in stunned silence, staring out the window, her hands gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I couldn't look at her. I didn't want to. It wasn't like I felt bad about what I'd done. No, I didn't regret the public humiliation. I wanted her to feel it. But seeing her like that, broken and shattered, didn't bring me the kind of satisfaction I imagined. It wasn't justice, it was just a mess. A mess that I had made. I started to wonder if this was worth it. Had I really made her see the full extent of what she'd done? Or had I just sunk us both deeper into something that couldn't be fixed? We didn't talk the entire drive home, but when we walked in, the kids were already asleep. I couldn't even look at them. How do you explain to your children that their mother has been cheating on you? How do you make sense of that? I was so angry, so torn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But what would that accomplish? Nothing. Laura, on the other hand, still hadn't said a word. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just stood there frozen. I don't even think she knew what to say. The next few days were a blur. Laura didn't leave the house much. She avoided me, and every time I tried to talk to her, she'd shut down, telling me she needed time to process. She didn't even want to address what happened at the club. She didn't want to talk about David. I could tell she was embarrassed, but I couldn't bring myself to feel bad for her. She made her bed. She made her choices. The worst part was the phone calls. It felt like every time I turned around, Laura was on the phone with someone, crying, pleading, explaining herself. I didn't know who she was talking to at first. I didn't want to know. But it wasn't long before I found out she was calling her friends, trying to justify what she did. She called David a few times too. I could hear the voice messages. I could hear the excuses pouring out. She was sorry, she told him. She wasn't thinking. It didn't mean anything. The same old garbage. That's when I started to feel the anger building again. It was one thing for her to betray me, but it was another thing entirely to still defend it. To make excuses. To act like this was just some mistake that could be swept under the rug. I could hear the tone in her voice when she spoke to David, and it drove me insane. She was still trying to salvage whatever twisted connection they had. But I wasn't going to let her. Not anymore. The next day, the video from the club went viral. It spread faster than I ever imagined. People in her friend circle started talking. Her followers started commenting. She became the subject of memes. I saw it all unfold in real time on my phone, and for the first time I felt something resembling satisfaction. The texts started flooding in. People reached out, telling me how sorry they were, but also how impressed they were with how I handled it. Friends of hers, people I thought I could trust, sent me messages of support. I didn't care about their sympathy though. It wasn't for them. It wasn't even for me. It was for Laura. She was the one who had to wear the shame of it all. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation. That was bad, sure. She was getting messages left and right, some from people she didn't even know, all of them reminding her of what she'd done. Her perfect little life was falling apart. But the worst part? The worst part was David. He couldn't run from it either. He had tried to act like he was untouchable, like he was some fitness guru, above reproach. But when his face started showing up on the internet, when people started calling him out, it all came crashing down for him too. He tried to save face, to pretend it didn't bother him, but I could see it in his eyes every time I ran into him. He was losing control. People were distancing themselves from him. People who used to look up to him, admire him, now turned their backs. And that felt good. In some sick way, seeing him squirm, seeing him face the consequences of what he'd done, was a small, fleeting victory. He deserved it. But Laura? She didn't deserve anything. She spent the next few days pacing the house, crying when she thought I wasn't looking, trying to explain herself in 100 different ways. She called me, tried to talk, begged me to understand. I didn't listen. I didn't want to. She didn't get to keep playing the victim after everything she'd done. But then, a week later, she came to me. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching, when she walked in. She looked different. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were swollen from crying, and for the first time, I could tell she wasn't just putting on a show. This wasn't about her reputation. This wasn't about saving face. This was about her own guilt. "I'm sorry, Sam," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know what came over me. I was selfish. I hurt you, I hurt our family, and I'm so sorry." I didn't respond at first. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late, that it didn't matter. But another part of me, something I wasn't ready to admit, wanted to believe her. I didn't say anything though. I couldn't. Not after everything. I couldn't just let her apologize and think that would fix it. "You don't get it," I finally said, my voice cold. "This wasn't about a mistake, Laura. This was about you choosing him over me. You chose him over us. And now you have to live with it." Her face fell and I saw the pain in her eyes. But I wasn't ready to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She left after that. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister for a while. And I stayed behind in the house we'd built together. Alone. It was like everything that was real, the life we had, the family we built, had been ripped out from under me. But at the same time I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The lies, the deceit, the games. It was done. But the truth was, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to expose her, to humiliate her, to make her feel what I felt. Because in the end, nothing would bring back what we had. Nothing would make me forget how I felt that night when I saw the two of them together in my own home. Nothing would fix the hole she left in me. And maybe that's the hardest part of it all. Revenge, in the end, doesn't give you what you really want. It doesn't make things better. It doesn't fix the hurt. It just leaves you with more questions. More emptiness. But at least, in that moment, I had freedom. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to be someone's fool. And that, in its own twisted way, felt like the first step toward moving on. Time doesn't heal wounds as quickly as people like to say. It just numbs them. You keep moving, keep putting one foot in front of the other, but the hurt is still there, simmering beneath the surface. For a while, I thought I'd be able to move on easily. I had my kids, my work, my friends. I had the freedom to do what I wanted, to go where I wanted. I should have felt like I'd won, like I'd finally gotten some justice. But what I didn't realize was how hollow that victory would feel. I kept thinking back to the video, the way it played out at the club. Laura's face as she watched her own betrayal unfold on that screen. The shock, the denial, the humiliation. It was like a movie, like something you watch from the outside and never imagined could be your real life. The whole event was so surreal, like I was just watching a train wreck from a distance, not fully understanding the destruction I'd caused. I hadn't planned for the aftermath to feel like this. I spent weeks trying to make sense of everything. I'd replay conversations in my head, wondering where I went wrong, if I could have seen it coming, if there was something I missed. Could I have done something differently? Was it me? Was I not enough? But then I'd shake myself out of those thoughts. No, this was on her. It wasn't my fault. She chose this. I tried to focus on the kids. They needed me. They were young, still so innocent to everything, and I didn't want them to feel the weight of the mess I was stuck in. But there was no getting around it. The tension between Laura and me was thick enough to cut with a knife. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was about the kids or logistics. There were no apologies left to say. No words that could undo what had happened. I didn't need to hear her sorry again. That word had lost all meaning. But the silence was the hardest part. I realized that even though she was gone, even though she wasn't living here anymore, she still occupied my thoughts, every minute of every day. I couldn't shake her. I couldn't stop thinking about her with him, about their secret smiles, the messages, the plans they had. I could still feel that sting, like it had just happened. It wasn't going away. I started spending more time at work. I'd show up early, stay late, take on more projects just to fill the void. My design work had always been a big part of who I was, but now it became my escape. I lost myself in deadlines, sketches, and clients who needed me. I worked like a machine because in those moments when I was focused on my craft, I didn't think about what had happened to me. I didn't think about the mess she'd made of our lives. But that didn't last forever. The silence at home was louder than the noise at work. It was the kind of silence that made you feel crazy, like everything you thought you knew about your life was wrong. I'd walk through the house and it felt empty. Even when the kids were there, it didn't feel like home anymore. I had to keep reminding myself that I didn't need her. I didn't need her lies, her deceit, her games. But it wasn't that easy. It wasn't that simple. Eventually, I couldn't run from it anymore. I had to face it. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. So, one night, when the kids were staying with my parents, I sat down and wrote her a message. I didn't even know what I was going to say at first, but the words just came out. I want to divorce Laura. I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I read it a few times, let the words sink in. It felt final. It felt like a door closing on a chapter of my life that I had no desire to go back to. But at the same time, it hurt like hell. I waited a few days for her to respond. I knew she would, I just didn't know how. I didn't expect her to beg or cry or apologize again. I didn't want to hear it. But part of me, a small part, still wanted her to say the right thing. Still wanted her to fight for us. Still wanted her to prove she could fix what she'd broken. She never did. When her reply came, it was short. Okay. I understand. Just like that. She didn't ask me why. She didn't tell me she was sorry. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to explain herself. She just agreed. And that was it. The lack of emotion, the lack of fight, hit me harder than I expected. I thought I'd feel relief or triumph, but I just felt empty. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was just numb. The next few months were a blur. We went through the motions of separating our lives, splitting time with the kids, dividing up the household things, figuring out the logistics of it all. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. The hardest part was the kids. I didn't want them to feel like they had to choose sides. I didn't want them to carry the weight of what had happened between us. But that was something I couldn't control. The damage had been done. They were already feeling it. I tried to be a good dad. I tried to show up for them, be there for them, even though I felt like a shell of the person I used to be. I made dinner, took them to their soccer games, helped with homework. But inside I was falling apart. I didn't know how to fix it, how to fix myself, how to fix everything she had torn apart. And then one day I ran into David. It was just a chance encounter, but it hit me like a freight train. I hadn't seen him since the event, hadn't wanted to. I had no desire to speak to him, let alone see him face to face. But there he was at the grocery store, standing in the same aisle as me, picking up something for lunch. I couldn't avoid him. We locked eyes and I saw the guilt written all over his face. He didn't look like the confident, cocky guy he had been at the gym. Now he just looked tired, worn down. He looked like someone who had realized that his actions had consequences. Neither of us said anything at first. The silence between us was deafening. Finally he broke it. "I'm sorry, man," he said, looking down at the ground. "I don't know what to say. I fucked up. I should have never." He trailed off and I could tell he didn't know how to finish the sentence. I didn't know how to respond either. Part of me wanted to punch him in the face to tell him he ruined everything. But the other part of me just felt tired. "I know," I said, my voice cold. "You fucked up. But you're not the one who has to live with it." He nodded, looking like he wanted to say something more, but he didn't. He just turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with a cart full of groceries, feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just tired. Tired of the hurt. Tired of the anger. Tired of the revenge. And that was the moment I realized it wasn't about any of them anymore. It wasn't about Laura or David or even the people who judged me for what happened. It was about me. About figuring out how to move forward. How to rebuild myself from the ground up without all the baggage they left behind. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting there. Slowly. And maybe that was the most important step I could take. Letting go. I'm not sure when it happened. It wasn't like one day I woke up and felt different, like a switch flipped in my brain. It was more gradual, like the fog slowly lifting, until one day I realized I could see clearly again. It had been about 6 months since I told Laura I wanted a divorce. Things had settled into a routine, one that wasn't easy, but it was manageable. The kids were still adjusting. I was still adjusting. But I could feel a change coming. A shift I wasn't prepared for, but one I needed even if I didn't know it yet. It started small. I began waking up without that pit in my stomach. I started finding myself getting through the day without feeling like I was holding my breath the whole time. I'd get in the car to go to work and realize I wasn't fuming with anger or replaying every conversation with Laura in my head. It wasn't that I was forgetting about her, or the affair, or the mess she'd made of everything. It was just that I wasn't letting it control me anymore. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was regaining control of my life. At first, it wasn't anything dramatic. It was little things, like when I spent a Saturday afternoon at the park with the kids, feeling the sun on my face and realizing how much I'd been missing out on by drowning myself in bitterness. Or when I took a random trip to a local art gallery, just to look at something beautiful and get lost in it. I remember one evening in particular. I had the kids for the weekend and we decided to go get ice cream. They were laughing and fighting over whose cone was bigger, and I could feel the sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. There was still a lot of pain under the surface, but it wasn't dominating me anymore. It wasn't running the show. I was starting to think that maybe this life I was building without Laura could be enough. Maybe it could even be better. But just when I started to feel like I was moving forward, I got the phone call. It was late in the evening, the kids were in bed and I was sitting on the couch watching some mindless show. I hadn't heard from Laura in weeks and honestly I'd stopped expecting anything from her. She'd moved on with her life and I had too. The kids and I were settling into our new reality. But then my phone rang. "Sam?" Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. "Can we talk? Please?" I knew this moment was coming. I'd been expecting it, but that didn't make it any easier. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology that was long overdue, or maybe an attempt to justify everything again, to convince me that she was a different person now. But I wasn't ready for what she said next. "I need you to listen to me," she started, her voice faltering. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been working on myself, trying to figure out who I am without all the mistakes, without the lies. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you, to our family. I don't expect you to forgive me, I just need you to know how truly sorry I am." I sat there, stunned for a second. I hadn't heard this kind of apology from her in months. It wasn't the empty "I'm sorry" that came after the affair was exposed. This was different. She was speaking like someone who understood the weight of what she'd done. And that threw me off. For a moment I was quiet. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the destruction she'd caused, to tell her she could never fix this. But another part of me, this quieter part, wanted to hear her out. I didn't want to go down this path again. I didn't want to open that door. But for some reason I did. Why now? I finally asked. Why didn't you come to me before? She was quiet for a long time. Because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to face you after everything. I've been too ashamed. I thought you'd hate me forever. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. I don't hate you, Laura. I don't even know if I can hate you. But I'm not going back. You broke something in me and I'm not sure that can be fixed. Not for me and not for us. Her voice broke. I know. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I've been talking to a therapist, Sam. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to fix the things in me that led to what I did. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she could change. But another part of me was still so scarred by what she'd done. I couldn't just pretend that the past didn't exist. I couldn't forget what had happened, what she had taken from me. I don't know if I can be that person for you anymore, I said, my voice tight. I'm not sure I can trust you again. I can't undo what happened. And I don't know how to forgive you. She was silent for a while and I could hear her sniffling through the phone. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the person who cheated on you. I'm trying to be better. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know if I was supposed to forgive her or if I should just walk away. I had spent so many months hating her, resenting her, wanting revenge. But now that she was offering me something, some form of accountability, some sign of change, it threw me off. I didn't know how to feel. I need time, Laura, I said finally. I need time to figure out what I want, what's best for me and for the kids. But don't expect me to just forget. I won't do that. I understand, she said softly. And I won't ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. She hung up shortly after that. And for the first time in a long time I felt conflicted. It wasn't the rage I'd been holding onto for months, or the numbness that had settled in my chest. It was something else, something that felt like a possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward for both of us. Not together, but separately. Maybe we could both heal. Maybe there was peace for me somewhere down the road. But that peace wouldn't come in the form of reconciliation, not yet. I wasn't ready to trust her again. I wasn't ready to invite her back into my life, even as a co-parent. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay stuck in the past. The future, whatever it looked like, was waiting for me. I didn't know what it would bring, but I knew I had to start living it. And that's when it hit me. The real healing would come from letting go, not just of her but of all the anger, all the resentment, all the need for revenge. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. It's funny how life works. You think you've figured things out, that you're heading in the right direction, and then it throws something at you that completely blindsides you. The unexpected happens when you least expect it. It could be a phone call, a glance across the room, or in my case, an unexpected encounter with someone I didn't think I'd ever see again. A few months after my conversation with Laura, I was starting to feel like I was in a better place. The anger was starting to fade into the background. The bitterness wasn't as sharp anymore. I was focusing on what mattered, the kids, my work, myself. I had even started dating again, albeit very casually. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted to feel like a person again, not just a guy who'd been hurt and betrayed. The idea of meeting someone new didn't seem as terrifying as it once had. But I wasn't ready to fully let go of the past. There was still a part of me deep down that wasn't sure if I ever would be. Then one night, while I was at a local bar with a few friends, I saw him. David. At first, I thought it was a trick of the lights. But no, it was him, standing at the bar, laughing with a group of people. My stomach dropped the second I saw him. I hadn't seen him since the club event, and I hadn't really thought about him much since then either. But there he was in front of me, like he'd never been part of the chaos he'd helped create. I stood frozen for a second just watching him. He was different too, less confident, maybe even a little deflated. His cocky swagger from the gym days was gone. He didn't look like the guy who destroyed my life. He looked like a guy who had been through something, like the weight of the world had fallen on him. It wasn't like I wanted to confront him, but I couldn't just ignore him either. This was the man who had ruined my marriage, who had betrayed me not only by sleeping with my wife but by taking a part of my life I'd never get back. But something in the way he carried himself now made me hesitate. I hadn't seen this version of him before. Maybe he was a broken version of the arrogant trainer I once knew. Maybe he wasn't the monster I had painted him to be in my mind. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked over to him. He looked up when I approached, his eyes widening for a second. For a split second, I could see the recognition in his face. It was like he knew this wasn't a friendly encounter. He stood up, his posture stiff. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. "Sam," he said slowly, like he wasn't sure what to say. I didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Me neither." There was an awkward pause. We both knew why I was there, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. We were both too aware of the past that we couldn't escape, even if we wanted to. "How's everything?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. It was clear he wasn't sure if he should even ask. I wasn't sure if I should answer. "I'm good," I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. "I've been working on moving forward." He nodded, his face softening slightly. "I'm glad to hear that." "Really?" I stared at him for a moment, not sure what to say next. A part of me wanted to ask him how he was doing, wanted to know if he was suffering the way I had. But I didn't care. I had no interest in his life. He was the one who had wrecked everything, who had destroyed the trust, the family, the future I thought I'd have. Why should I care? Instead I said, "You've got a lot of nerve, you know?" David's face tightened. "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry." I don't know what else to say. There it was again, the apology. The one that meant nothing because it came too late. It was like throwing a bucket of water on a fire after the house had already burned down. "You should have said that a long time ago," I said, my voice getting a little harder. "You should have said that the day you slept with my wife. You don't get to apologize now and act like everything's fine. You don't get to pretend you didn't destroy everything." David lowered his head, his shoulders slumping. "I know, Sam. I know. I fucked up. I can't fix what I did, but I can't keep pretending like I'm not sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect it. I just needed to tell you." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but I didn't know if I could believe it. What good did an apology do now? What did it matter that he felt sorry now? It wasn't going to erase the hurt, the betrayal, the years of trust that had been shattered. "You can't undo it," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "You can't fix it. All you can do is live with what you've done." He nodded. "I know." There was a long silence between us, and for a second I thought we might just walk away, both of us pretending this awkward moment never happened. But I couldn't do that. Not after everything. I had to say something more, something that would give me the closure I didn't realize I needed. "You know," I said, my voice quieter now, "I don't hate you, David. I don't even know if I'm capable of hating you anymore. But I don't think we'll ever be able to move past this. Not me, not Laura, and not you. We all have to live with what we did. And that's the worst part. There's no easy fix." David looked up, his eyes heavy with guilt. "I get it," he said. "I really do." We stood there for a moment longer, the silence wrapping around us like a blanket. It was a silence full of regret, full of things that couldn't be taken back. Finally, I nodded once, turned and walked away. The rest of the night felt like a blur. I didn't care about the drink in my hand or the friends around me. I didn't care about anything except that conversation. It wasn't about revenge anymore or even justice. It was about the realization that we were all just people, trying to make sense of the mess we'd made. Maybe that was the hardest part, understanding that no one walks away from this kind of thing unscathed. Not David. Not Laura. Not me. I wasn't sure what would come next, but in that moment I knew one thing for sure. I had to stop letting them control my life. I had to stop letting what they did to me define who I was going to be. The only thing that mattered now was how I chose to live moving forward. The kids, my career, my peace of mind, those were the things I had to focus on. So I kept walking. One step at a time, moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. The days after I ran into David felt like a weird mixture of clarity and chaos. It was like a chapter in my life had come to an end, but the book was still wide open, and I wasn't sure what the next page would bring. I had this weird peace about it, but also a gnawing sense that something was still unfinished. And in a way, I guess I was right. After that night, I thought about the situation less. My anger had dissolved into something almost numb. I wasn't reliving every detail of the affair anymore. I wasn't plotting some big public expose or playing out some revenge fantasy in my head. That chapter was closed, and I was ready to turn the page. At least that's what I told myself. But I wasn't quite there yet. The next few weeks passed by in a blur of normalcy. Work had picked up. I was busy with a new project, and the kids had settled into their new routine with me. They still went over to Laura's place on the weekends, and I still had those moments of anxiety when I'd wonder what she was doing, who she was seeing, whether she had truly changed, or if she was just better at hiding her lies now. And then one day, out of nowhere, she called me. It had been a while since we'd talked. There was no real reason to talk, no reason for either of us to keep in touch, really. The kids saw her on the weekends and we had the occasional text exchange about them, but that was about it. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I picked up, her voice was shaky, like she'd been holding something back. "Sam, I need to talk to you," she said, the words tumbling out like she'd been rehearsing them. I took a deep breath, not sure if I wanted to hear what was coming next. "About what?" "I know we haven't really talked much since everything happened," she started. "And I've been working on myself. But something's come up and I think we need to discuss it. It's about the kids. That got my attention." "What happened?" She hesitated before speaking, her voice growing quieter. I started seeing someone. I think it's serious. I just wanted you to know before you heard it from someone else." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to feel angry, to scream at her that she didn't get to just move on like that she didn't have the right to be happy again after what she'd done. But another part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, felt this strange pang of jealousy. It wasn't because I still loved her. No, that ship had sailed. But there was something about hearing that she was moving on, that she was sharing herself with someone else, that hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I couldn't even tell if I was more upset that she was dating again, or that she was dating someone before I was. Either way, I couldn't ignore the mix of emotions that flooded me. "Who is he?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "His name," she told me, "was Jake. He was someone she'd met through a mutual friend. A good guy," she assured me, as though that was supposed to make me feel better. "I just wanted you to know, Sam," she added, almost pleading. "I don't want you to think I'm rushing into anything. But I really care about him. I think this could be something real." I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't like I could stop her. She had every right to move on. I had moved on too in my own way. But hearing her talk about another man like that, hearing her speak so casually about the future she was building with someone else, it still stung. "I'm happy for you," I said, the words feeling strange coming out of my mouth. I wasn't happy for her. I wasn't even sure if I was ready to hear it. But I said it anyway because that's what you're supposed to say, right? "Thanks," she said quietly. "I didn't want to keep this from you." I didn't respond right away. My mind was racing, trying to process the fact that she was doing exactly what I had imagined her doing all along. Moving forward, leaving me behind. "You can tell the kids when you're ready," she added after a pause. "I just didn't want to keep this a secret from you." I nodded, though I don't think she could see me. "I'll talk to them when I think it's time." After that, we didn't say much else. The conversation had ended as awkwardly as it had started. But something in me shifted. I couldn't say if it was anger or resentment or if I was just sad. But I realized, maybe for the first time, that I didn't want to go down the path of pretending everything was fine. I didn't want to bury the hurt anymore. I didn't want to keep pretending I wasn't pissed off that she had moved on, that she had the freedom to build a new life while I was still stuck in the ashes of what we'd had. And maybe that was what had been eating at me all along. The fact that even after everything she was still living her life, still moving forward, still allowed to find happiness, while I was left here in this weird in-between space. I was starting to realize something, though. The more I focused on what Laura was doing with her life, the less I was focusing on what I was doing with mine. The more I looked at her, the more I compared myself to her, the more I kept myself trapped in this cycle of bitterness and resentment. I couldn't keep living like that. I couldn't keep defining myself by what she was doing or how she was moving on. That night, I sat on the couch and just let myself feel whatever I needed to feel. And for once, I didn't try to bottle it up. I didn't try to rush past the anger, the sadness, the loneliness. I just let it wash over me. Because I knew something that I hadn't fully understood until now. I had to stop comparing myself to Laura. I had to stop thinking that her happiness somehow diminished mine. I had to stop measuring my worth by how she was living her life. And in that moment, I realized something else, something I had been running from for a long time. I had the power to move on too. So, I put my phone down and got up. I walked outside and stood on the porch, staring up at the night sky. There was something so simple, so peaceful about it. The world was still spinning. Things were still moving. And maybe it was time for me to start moving with it. Tomorrow was a new day. And I was done being stuck in the past. It was time for me to live my life too. The thing about moving on is that it's not like flipping a switch. It's not as simple as waking up one day and saying, "I'm over it." There's no magical moment when everything suddenly clicks into place. It's more like a slow unraveling, one step forward then two steps back. It's messy. It's confusing. But it's also freeing, and for the first time in years I felt like I was starting to breathe again. I spent the next few months focusing on myself, on what I needed, what I wanted. I had spent so much time caught up in the whirlwind of Laura's betrayal, in trying to get revenge and wanting closure, that I had forgotten to care about my own life. The kids were doing well. They were adjusting. I was adjusting. And I was starting to find a rhythm again. I kept busy with work, even picked up some side projects to keep myself challenged. I began exercising more, getting into a routine that was just mine. I even took a trip. Nothing huge, just a weekend away to a cabin in the mountains. I didn't want to go, but I forced myself to. And for the first time in forever, I felt like I could just be, away from the chaos, away from the reminders of everything that had happened. I also started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just casual, low-pressure stuff. A coffee here, a drink there. At first, I was skeptical. I didn't think I was ready for another relationship. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be ready. But I had to try. I wasn't going to let what Laura did to me define the rest of my life. But something inside me started to shift. I didn't want to be the guy who was always looking over his shoulder, wondering what was happening behind his back. I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to be angry anymore. It wasn't about getting revenge or proving anything to Laura or anyone else. It was about finding my own peace. I learned that letting go of the past doesn't mean erasing it. It means accepting it. Understanding that, yes, life had thrown a massive curveball at me. But I had the power to move forward. And I could either be stuck in the past, forever angry and resentful, or I could take the hard road and make the choice to leave it behind. So I chose to leave it behind. Laura and I still talked, mostly about the kids, nothing more. And while things between us were never going to be the same, there was a sense of civility now. I no longer felt like she was holding some power over me. She had made her choices. And I had made mine. One day I got a text from her. It was a simple message just asking how the kids were doing. But there was something in it that felt different. It wasn't about the affair. It wasn't about her or David. It was just about us as parents, navigating the awkward terrain of shared responsibility. And in that moment, I realized we had both finally moved past the worst of it. "I'm doing okay," I wrote back. "They're good. We're good." Her response was simple. "Glad to hear it." There was nothing more to say, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel the need to say anything else. We had reached this place where there was no longer any unfinished business between us. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I met someone new a few months later. Her name was Emma. She was kind, funny, and most importantly, she was real. It wasn't like those early dates when everything felt forced, like I was trying to pretend to be someone I wasn't. With Emma, it was easy. There was no pretending. There were no walls to put up. I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere, but I didn't feel the pressure to figure it out right away. She understood me and I understood her. There was no rush to be something we weren't. We took it slow, which felt right for both of us. Emma didn't ask about my past and I didn't feel the need to share it all. But I could tell she saw me. Not as some broken guy who'd been cheated on, not as someone carrying the weight of a failed marriage, but as a man who had learned from his mistakes, who had grown through pain, and who was ready to build something new. I wasn't trying to fix my life with her. I wasn't trying to make her the replacement for Laura. Emma was just Emma. And that was enough. As the months passed, I felt the pieces of my life slowly falling into place. The kids were happy. I was happy. And I realized, in the quiet moments when I wasn't thinking about my past, that I had built a life that felt solid again. The chaos that had once consumed me had finally settled into something calmer, more manageable. There were still days when I missed the way things used to be, when I wished I could go back and undo all the mistakes, all the hurt. But I had learned something important in the process. You can't undo the past no matter how badly you want to. All you can do is build from where you are now. I didn't need to keep punishing myself. I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. I had done that. I had used it for a time to give myself the courage to take control, to move forward. But now I was free. Free from the bitterness, free from the obsession over revenge, free from the need to prove something to the people who had hurt me. And as for Laura, I knew she was still figuring things out, still trying to make sense of the choices she'd made. Maybe she'd learned something, maybe she hadn't. But that wasn't my concern anymore. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. And I wasn't the man who had been betrayed. I was someone new. I was someone who had learned that revenge, in the end, was a fleeting thing. It might have given me satisfaction in the moment, but it didn't last. What lasted was the decision to move on. To let go. To forgive, not for them but for myself. That was the only way I was going to find peace. And in the quiet moments of my new life, I finally realized I had found it. I wasn't going to look back anymore. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen and I will see you there.